no autopsies performed. And I sit there and I'm embalming the body, and they weren't these big ones like what I'm showing you right now, but there were many of them that were about the length of my fingernail, and it looked like little parasites, but they're not parasites. And I had to change my terminology a little bit, but they were like little, about that long, and there was a bunch of them coming out in the blood while I was embalming her. And I'm thinking, was that what killed her? I can't say. I'm not a pathologist. People accuse me, who are you?
You're just observing.
I'm just observing. I am just telling you what I see, and not just telling you about it.
Well, you're showing it.
I'm showing the evidence of what I see. You know, these fact checkers have had 2 years now to sit there and debunk my claims and my stories. If this stuff existed prior, and it's in the medical literature, and there's, you know, doctors, and they take pictures all the time. If this stuff was actually a normal occurrence, it would be all over in medical literature. Why haven't they shown?
Well, the fact checkers aren't interested in facts.
No.
I think that
Right.
we have discovered that is the case. But now there's enough data, and even the medical documents are out, that basically your account from this is backed up now by medical science as far as studies post-vaccine are concerned. But let's just hone in on one thing. Part of the process of embalming is you're draining the liquids, you're draining the blood, right?
We're pumping in a preservative, formaldehyde typically, and we're pumping it into an artery. And then it's as that pressure builds up and it pushes it out, and it comes out of the vein. So you're pumping the fluid in through the arterial system, and you're allowing the drainage to come out through the venous system. And so that's what we do for the preservation. Always in my earlier years is always, if you're going to run into blood clots, the blood clots are in the veins. It's where there's arteries have pressure pushing, your heart's pushing it, forcing that fluid. So there's not like a lot of time or anything for the clot to form. But in the venous side, as it's coming back towards the heart, the pressure's lower, the blood moves a little slower, and that's where blood sometimes will congeal. That's where you get deep vein thrombosis, and a lot of the blood clots, they occur on that side. When I started seeing these clots, these white fibrous looking things that were coming out of the veins, and I started noticing them in the artery, and the only time I notice them in the artery, think about it, is I have to make an incision and open that up to put my instrument in there. And when I make my incision, and if I see the clot right there, I could just take my forceps, which are like tweezers, and simply just pull it out.
And we've now seen this footage.
Oh, absolutely. But after that first interview that I did with Dr. Jane Ribby, some of the early comments were some people that were in the medical field, and they questioned that when I had said that clots in arteries, they were like, clots in arteries, I mean, yeah, it can exist, but it's so extremely rare. Well, literally within like 48 hours, I had one, and I saw it in the vein, and I had someone working with me, and I had this person take my phone and record me taking out of the vein, and then
it's been seen millions of times now, by the way.
And then no, that's a different one. This is before that.
Oh, multiple ones.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So it's not very often, but then I turned everything, put the phone down and all this, and I went to go ahead and open up the artery, and as soon as I opened up the artery, I saw it in the artery, and I was like, hold on a second, we got to sit there and, I told her, I said, I want to record this one because people were just saying they don't happen in arteries, and I'm like,
it barely even took a day.
It barely took a day, maybe 2 days at the most, I think.
And that's how common it is compared to, what, zero times before?
No, it's not. Even now, it's not like it's super, super common, but prior to all of this, The only time that I might see some kind of blood coagulation in an artery would have been a person that was found dead and they've been dead for several days, and somehow some blood in the arterial system turns into, like, it literally looks like grape jelly, and it's still in a malleable state. It's not a firm.
But you're talking about from almost no occurrences to now.
Yes.
You are seeing it. But this is why I want to why I wanted to hone in on this and really get you to explain something. If you put, and you kind of explained this earlier, you called it like grape jelly. If you can even get a blood clot to stay in shape long enough, and you put it in your fingers and you rub it like this, it's basically going to disintegrate and go away. If you put one of these fiber clots in your fingers and rub it like this, does it lose its shape at all?
No.
So it's basically like a solid.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. Yeah, it's almost like tissue, literally like tissue.
You're talking about like muscle tissue.
No, well, it's muscle tissue is red, and it's not as, in the individual fibers, it's not as strong as this stuff. This is almost like a ligament or tendon, rubbery stuff. It's not as hard as a ligament, but not exactly the same, but it's similar. I wish I could. It's hard to describe. I mean, you literally have to.
Well, I guess maybe I would ask it like this: could you even pull out a blood clot and have it maintain its shape like that?
Prior to all of this, when we pull out a blood clot in the past, you can get some larger blood clots, but you had to be careful with them because they fall apart so easy.
But not these.
These don't. I've got an image where I took two of my locking forceps, which are kind of like scissors, but they clamp into place. It's like a clamp. And I'm holding one of these clots, and I've got two forceps dangling from this thing, holding them in place. One was probably.
So that's how strong it is. Yeah. It can even hold weight.
It can hold some weight. Now the skinnier ones, they're weaker, but you get some of these fatter ones, they're actually holding.
Well, those ones look pretty pretty solid there, like they could hold up some weight.
And they're not hollow. They're not hollow. People want to say that it's a vessel. No, it's not a vessel. It's what's coming out of the vessels. The only thing that should be coming out of the vessels is blood.
So I'm curious, because I think, quite frankly, from my standpoint, this would even add more validity to your observations here. Before you started noticing this stuff, were you even interested in COVID vaccines or, say, conspiracy theories, or were you aware of any of the theories? Like, did you have any thoughts about them at all, or you started seeing this and that's when you started to wonder?
Right. In the when the COVID vaccine came out, late December 2020, and actually really started ramping up in January of 21, I was asked I was offered to go get my COVID vaccine. The reason why I chose not to was because around May or June of 2020, I tested positive for COVID. Now, it was mostly just a cold. It wasn't that big. I had a little bit of a bad cough, but it didn't last very long. I didn't do anything major. The only reason why I tested positive is because my wife was sick and she didn't want to go to the doctor by herself. I said, well, I'll go with you. And I mean, if you get that, I'll get tested with you. Come to find out that I had it. Without that test, I wouldn't have known. But when I was offered to go get the vaccine, it was still at a time where you had to meet the age requirement. The elderly were first, and the people, and then and also some of the frontline people. And because I work with the dead, they kind of considered us that way. So I was offered a few times to go down to the health department at a certain time and a date where we could go and get our shot. My mind said, I already had COVID. Why would I get a vaccine for something that I already had? And if the vaccine is so important, which at the time I didn't think either way, pro or against, wasn't 100% a big deal.
But in other words, you didn't have any agenda or preconceived notions.
No, why would I? And I didn't take the vaccine because why would I prevent somebody else who might need it when the supply was relatively short at the time? You know, remember, it went through stages. I mean, in the beginning, you had to be a certain age, you had to have, you know, frontline a frontline worker.
Well, I would guess it goes without saying you're glad you didn't take it.
Oh yeah. It didn't take but a few months, or just a couple of months into 2021, noticing something was very wrong. People were starting to scratch their head, and what I was seeing, I was starting to question: is this really a good idea?
Well, and that's just reasonable deduction. You're saying, I was never seeing this, now I'm seeing this. What's the variable? It's the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, before we sat down, we were just kind of talking a little bit, and you had mentioned to me how you don't feel comfortable or you don't like flying anymore. And my thought was, I can't stand it either. It's uncomfortable. I get felt up by NSA. It's all this stuff. And that's not what you meant.
Nope.
What did you mean?
I mean, I'm concerned for the pilots. I met Captain Bob Snow, who was a pilot that had a cardiac arrest on the deck as they were unloading, and I think it was in Dallas Fort Worth. And luckily, he's still alive. I mean, he's a really nice guy. He believes it was 100% this COVID vaccine. He was totally healthy. And the thing about the pilots is, to be a pilot, you have to have flight physical. So you don't just go, you know, and be a pilot. You have to maintain a health record. They were very stringent on the health. Yeah, were. And they backed that off a little bit as far as their heart, whatever it is that they do.
They seem to be a lot less stringent about multiple things around there these days.
Yes, but so many of the airlines were mandating their pilots to get vaccinated. And well, I know people in the military. One of my daughters, she had a boyfriend that was in flight school, had to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And ended up having some heart issues. And I know there are other pilots that have had issues, and some of them are afraid to say anything because if they say anything, they can lose their flight status, and if they lose their flight status, they can't make a living.
Right.
So some of them are staying silent.
Wow.
When they might be having health issues. So if you're on a takeoff or a landing is the most scary part. If an event happens, it's one thing when they're up there at altitude and the pilot collapses, there's time to react. My fear is that eventually one might have an incident on takeoff or landing when the critical moments of flight.
Suppose it's only a matter of time.
I'm afraid it is a matter of time.
Well, like I said, I was talking about discomfort. Like, I mean, literally, I'm uncomfortable on the plane. You're talking about something else. You're uncomfortable. You're worried the pilot could have an adverse reaction from a vaccine. You just mentioned, though, you are a veteran. You did spend a lot of time in the Army. You said something interesting to me. You think your service exposing these vaccine side effects was more important than your service in the Army.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, when you're serving in the military, you're serving to honor and defend and be a patriot and to, you know, defend the United States and the people. And I feel like I've done more. I feel more like I've done more in this, trying to help defend our country and our people, than all of my years in the military combined. And this has been a scary road. I've been told, you know, to watch your six. You're going to make a lot of people mad. Maybe you need to be quiet. You're going to lose your license. You're going to lose your job. People are going to stop using you. And threats may come. And they're saying this because they care about me. I get it.